One World Under Doom is about to kick off, Storm joins the Avengers, and there's this amazing villain that makes a return. Son. Jed McKay's Avengers run is amazing. So what ends up happening is this initially picks up out in Pluto. And basically you have this guy, which you guys are gonna recognize immediately, those of you guys who know what's going on, where he says, "This was my last resort. I had hoped to find lucidity here. I thought that the drifts of methane snow would offer me cold clarity. I was wrong. There is no truth here, no more than there was on Earth. Time to return and end it." And so what you do, and we'll talk about who this guy is here in a second, you switch over to basically Sam Wilson going to meet with Storm. And this is a really interesting exchange between the two of them, because while this technically picks up in the middle of issue number 17, which is kind of where the new Avengers run starts, that it comes in the aftermath of Blood Hunt, the story that we covered that was basically launched by Marvel to bank on the release of Blade, which that day will never come, and that what it did is it saw Blade possessed and then launching an attack using vampires against everybody on Earth. The important thing is that the first part of the story is basically Carol Danvers yelling at the Avengers because so many people died and they should have done better. But Sam Wilson has a little bit of a crisis here, because in his mind, Carol Danvers isn't necessarily wrong, right? What's the threshold for failure when it comes to the Avengers? When they make mistakes and when they get things wrong, or they're not as heroic as they should be, thousands, millions, potentially billions of people could die. They're Earth's mightiest heroes. Now, Storm does give Sam Wilson some clarity here, because he asks her the question we're trying to figure out during the Blood Hunt: did we fail? And the question that Storm comes up with is like, it's hardly something for me to weigh in on, Sam. And he's like, I just want an outside perspective. And so she says, was there any warning that you ignored? And he's like, I don't think there was. And she says, and did you fight back with any reservation? And he says, none. And she says, then to my mind, you, the Avengers, did everything you could. It was a terrible time, but you and I are no strangers to terrible times. I have fought in a war on an alien world, Sam. I know that even winning brings with it terrible losses. And she says, a hard truth is that there are simply times when you cannot save everyone. And where Sam Wilson almost kind of chimes in and says, but the response to Storm, but nothing. That's just the way that it goes. And it is, right? The weight of being a superhero is that you cannot save everyone. One of the best depictions of that are like in the Spider-Man comics, right? The death of Gwen Stacy, the death of Uncle Ben. There were certain circumstances surrounding those things where they potentially could have been avoided by Spider-Man. But the fact remains, when you are a superhero, you cannot be everywhere at one time. People are going to slip through the cracks, and unfortunately, those people could perish. And when it comes to these great big huge global calamities, it's the nature of the beast. And that's why Storm says, yes, you cannot save everybody, but it doesn't mean that you do not try. Even if it means that your blood is on the ground, even if it means your spirit leaving your body, you try. That is all you can do. That is all the Avengers can do. That is all any of us can do. And so that's where Sam kind of brings in the other half of this conversation, because he talks about the idea of being Captain America. And this is one of those elements to his character that you don't really see all that often, right? Ever since the Rick Remender run and the initial concern by Sam Wilson, which was like, am I prepared to wear the suit and the mantle of Captain America? He's always just kind of taken it in stride. But it is cool to see these instances where he's like, I don't know if I'm really Captain America. Like, am I ready to take up this mantle? Am I capable of being Captain America? A lot of time has passed since I originally donned the suit. A lot of calamities have happened. There have been a lot of shortcomings on my part. And that's where Storm says it is no small thing to wear a flag. It carries meaning, both good and bad, but you wear it well. And so ultimately, again, where Sam Wilson brings in the second part of this, he's like, we're Avengers, right? We stand for every thinking being on this planet, not just humans, but synthetics, Atlanteans, lava men, Maloids, and mutants. And that's where he says, like, we failed you guys, right? During the events of the fall of the House of X, and effectively when he's referencing the Krakoa era, he's like, we should have been there at your side, and we never should have let Orcus get as strong as it did. Now, this is where Storm gives him some perspective, right? She's like, okay, look, man, like, I see where you're coming from. I appreciate the sentiment. Understand, right? You're Avengers, right? You are Earth's mightiest heroes because you call yourselves that. But like, we're the X-Men, man, right? Like, the only reason you as the Avengers continue to live is because we allow you to. right? Like, we're the mutant population on Earth, man. Legion alone could kill all the Avengers on Earth like that. And that's to say nothing of Franklin Richards or Magneto or anybody, right? Because there is that alternate reality from Exiles where Magneto killed the world. So like there's all kinds of crazy things, right, that mutants can do. They are the most powerful force on Earth in the Marvel Universe. Now, of course, Storm doesn't say all that. I say all that because it's true. But at the end of the day, Sam Wilson's like, there were warnings and we had reservations. And by your own definition a minute ago, those are the attributes of failing, ignoring warnings and fighting without reservations or leaning into those reservations. And so he's like, that should not have happened. And he's like, the Avengers have to stand for mutants the same way we do for everyone else. We need mutant representation. We need a mutant voice. And he says, I want that person to be you. Now, one of the things to understand here, guys, for those of you who are new to Marvel Comics, this is not the first time a member of the X-Men has joined the Avengers. If my memory serves me correctly, Beast was the first one to do it, I'm pretty sure. And then you had Angel and Iceman on the Champions of Los Angeles, and I think they were like temporarily rolled over into the Avengers. My memory banks are failing me here, right? So don't swear by that. I know Beast was the first one. So it's not the first time that you see like Avengers and mutants teaming up on a singular team and just kind of going forward from there. But what you do here is you switch over to Gainesville, Florida. And the reason why was because this guy that we had referenced earlier in the story had appeared on Earth. He had given a man a thumb drive and a chunk of gold and said, you will deliver this thumb drive to where I tell you to, and this piece of gold will be your payment, right? Clearly worth some kind of a fortune. This guy did exactly that. He took the thumb drive to what's basically the local news. And initially they're just kind of like, why is there a superhero in Florida, right? Like, did they restart the command? Those of you guys who don't know what the command is, it's really, really cool. You're going to love this bit of history. Do you remember after Civil War when Iron Man basically won, right? Like the bad guys, quote unquote, basically won the whole thing? You got the 50 state initiative, which was a government sanctioned superhero team in all 50 states. The command was one of those, and they actually worked alongside Armor, basically S.H.I.E.L.D., but they monitor alternate realities. It was pretty cool, but it is a cool little reference, right? That's made here by Jed MacKay. But the bigger thing is they end up popping in the thumb drive and they're like, okay, everybody needs to see this. And so what ends up happening is that this message on the thumb drive is broadcast to the world. And this is when you get the man, right? My name is Hyperion. I was the Earth's greatest hero, and I saved it time and time again. I lived in a world that was good. I lived in a world that made sense, a world where I loved and was loved. That world was a lie. Everything I knew, everything I had done was a lie. And that's where Carol Danvers, in seeing this, is just like, everybody get the Avengers together, right? Like priority alert, because this is Hyperion, man. This guy is a hoss, right? To give you guys perspective, man, Hyperion is more than enough for pretty much anybody who's out there. And if I had to create a kind of knee-jerk hierarchy with no real evidence to support my claim, I would argue that you would go in the order of like Hyperion, Sentry, Blue Marvel, and Gladiator, right? Again, that's just me throwing out names and, not really looking up any information to verify, but that's kind of how I feel about that. And we'll talk about this world that Hyperion is discussing here in a second, because he says, if my world was a lie, what did that make me? If your world is real, then I am a lie. And if I am real, then it is your world that is the lie. I have no way to prove either, so I'm going to end both. By the time you hear this, I will be approaching Earth at a significant portion of the speed of light on a collision course. When I arrive, when I impact, what is lie and what is truth will no longer be relevant. I don't tell you this to frighten you. I tell you this so you can make peace with whatever God you believe in. Nothing can stop me. Hyperion out. Now, here's the thing. Here's what's going on here with Hyperion's whole message. Marvel wrote a story called Heroes Reborn, which I don't remember if we covered or not. It was kind of a reworking of the original Heroes Reborn from the 1990s. But what was really cool about this is you ended up learning that Mephisto had actually joined other alternate reality versions of himself and formed something called the Council of Red. And the idea was that Mephisto had effectively reworked the entirety of the Marvel universe, restructured it. So like the Avengers never became Avengers. Captain America was never thawed out from ice. And basically Thor was just like a guy in a town somewhere. He actually ends up taking his mug and slamming it on a countertop. And then like it turns into Mjolnir and like he becomes Thor. But essentially, there were no Avengers and no traditional superheroes. You did have guys like Juggernaut. In fact, I think Doctor Doom became Juggernaut in that story. You had the Incredible Hulk, which Hyperion easily overpowered, but Blade was the one who woke up in that reality and remembered everything with the way that it was supposed to be. And so he effectively starts, quote unquote, restoring the Avengers. And in doing that, it's very House of M-esque in the sense that they effectively confront Mephisto, everything gets set back to rights, and now Hyperion has no real home, right? That's what he's talking about when he's saying the world he lived in was a lie, that he was basically a superhero in a world that didn't exist. And so that's why you switch over to what's called the Impossible City. But the Impossible City is not new to the story. It's been around for a little while. Basically, it's the new base of operations for the Avengers, and they're no longer using the Progenitor Celestial. The Avengers Mountain is no longer a thing in Marvel. And so what they're doing here is they're trying to figure out what to do, because they go so far as to say that like they've encountered different versions of Hyperion over the years. And that's true. There's like a whole host of different versions of Hyperion. The most recent version, second to the one that you're seeing here, is Marcus Milton from Earth 13034. He's the one that you saw in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, who was so powerful that he could actually hold universes apart, even if only momentarily. Ultimately, it didn't work, but like he was that powerful, literally capable of keeping universes from crashing into each other during the incursions. It was nuts. But again, they're basically saying like this guy traveling this fast, he'll split the Earth in two, right? He'll destroy the planet. Now, there's clearly huge differences in power here, and that's part and parcel to the nature of Hyperion. Guys like King Hyperion killed all the superheroes and the cosmic entities in his own universe. Guys like Marcus Milton were basically Superman in Marvel Comics. This version of Hyperion is very similar to like the original depiction of Hyperion in Marvel, where he's just a really strong and powerful guy who can go toe to toe with the Avengers, and that's essentially it, right? So again, powers wax and wane when it comes to the character of Hyperion in Marvel. But where the Avengers are trying to figure out what to do next, that's when Storm steps in. And what ends up happening is Carol Danvers is like, we need all hands on deck, and I need you to go talk to the X-Men, and I need you to get the X-Men to allow us to use some kind of Omega level psychic, which is exactly what happens, right? When Storm goes to visit with Cyclops kind of busts her balls a little bit about the idea of joining the Avengers, and it's like, oh, you know, I see you're fraternizing with the enemy and your ex-husband, you know, and that kind of a thing. But it's also kind of funny because at the same time, it's this idea that ties back to like the old Uncanny X-Men stories, right? The story arc, Who Will Lead Them, where Storm and Cyclops fight for control of the X-Men. So it's one of these things where over the years, while Cyclops has consistently been the field commander, Storm's basically his equal. And so neither of them would really be comfortable taking orders from the other. And so this kind of gives Storm a place in Marvel outside of the X-Men, which is great because I love Storm's character and she should not be confined to the X-Men only. But ultimately, Cyclops presents her to Quentin Quire, right? The X-Men's Omega level telepath. Now, the reason why Jean Grey isn't here is actually covered during the events of the Phoenix comic, which we just recently covered. She's actually out in space right now dealing with a whole conflict that will inevitably lead to basically Jean Grey as the Phoenix Force fighting Thanos, which I am so excited about. Dude, that's gonna be so amazing when that happens. Holy cow, that's gonna be dope. And so after that, you have the Scarlet Witch, who goes to visit Doctor Strange and Clea, and kind of fills them in on everything that I had just told you about the Heroes Reborn thing, and Blade being the one who remembers, and all that kind of stuff. But in essence, with Thor traveling back to Asgard, what this does is with maybe 3 hours or so left, 2 hours at this point, it basically allows these three factions to blend their powers together. The power of magic working with the power of an Omega level telepath, combined with the all-seeing eyes of Sif, who's basically taken the place of Heimdall after Heimdall's death in Marvel Comics. And what they're doing is they're trying to find Hyperion in space because there's 5 billion kilometers between Pluto and Earth. And so it's like trying to find a human-sized bullet, right, in the nearly infinite expanse of space. And it might as well be infinite for all the area they have to search. But ultimately, they locate him, right? They find him making his way directly to the planet. Now, one of the things that Vision talks about here is the idea of time dilation. Because Hyperion is moving near the speed of light, for everybody on Earth, it's like 5 or 6 hours before he gets here. For Hyperion, it's almost instantaneous, right? Within minutes, a minute or so is when he will arrive on Earth. He's traveling that fast. And so what ends up happening is Iron Man develops a kind of hypersonic vibranium missile system, right? That will basically unleash a kind of vibranium dust. The reason being because Hyperion is weak to vibranium. In effect, what it'll do is he'll fly through this dust and it'll immediately strip him of his momentum, right? It'll pull all that speed off of him. And in doing so, he just won't be a real threat to Earth anymore. But while all that's going on, the Vision is a little concerned because he's like, there's gotta be another option here, right? There's gotta be some better alternative than like killing Hyperion. Because despite the fact that he's disillusioned and despite the fact that he just kind of sees himself as a person with no world and clearly suffering from some kind of a breakdown, we shouldn't kill the guy, right? Like he's a legitimate superhero and one of the most powerful beings in the universe. But ultimately, none of the Avengers really see any other way out. And so what ends up happening is that as Hyperion is heading to Earth, Vision tells the Impossible City to open a gateway. And the idea here is that while the gateway will open a portal to another dimension that Hyperion can fly to, which is a pretty cool place, that the reality is the door won't be able to close before Hyperion can just turn around and fly right back through the gate. And so the statement of Vision is, what if he doesn't want to leave? And so what ends up happening is the gate itself leads directly to Earth 901, which was a place that was decimated by the Ashen Combine. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what that means, the Impossible City itself is actually a kind of multiversal city that just exists out there. It was at one point a prison for the Ashen Combine, which was just like this crazy group of just fanatical individuals who were traveling the multiverse and wiping out whole worlds. Ultimately, they were defeated. But before that happened, they were imprisoned in the Impossible City, which was basically found by the Avengers by way of Kang the Conqueror and that whole story arc. What matters here is that Earth 901 was one of the worlds that was hit by the Ashen Combine. And so what this does is it gives Hyperion a purpose, because when Hyperion is sent through the portal, he's followed by a plastoid, basically a kind of machine of sorts that speaks on behalf of the Impossible City. And what it tells him is that this is a world that is basically, or has been historically, laid waste to. There are no superheroes here, but it is a world that is in need of a better tomorrow. Be the superhero of this world. This is now your purpose. And it just kind of allows Hyperion to go forward. Now, whether or not this will turn into a solo series for his character, I don't entirely know. It depends, I imagine, completely on whether or not Marvel is going to bring Hyperion into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But following this, Storm effectively joins the Avengers team seemingly full time. And so at that point, you switch over to Black Panther and to Captain America having a conversation. The conversation's kind of interesting because, of course, this basically means that Black Panther is going to go in and investigate the Ashen Combine, see what's going on with them, different things like that. But there's this really kind of hilarious moment here where like Black Panther's talking about how he's not really afraid of death, right? He's only afraid of losing. And he says, losing Aurora Monroe is my greatest failure. And it's like, but is it though, Black Panther? Because I'm pretty sure you're the one that killed the marriage. Like, I'm pretty sure you went to Storm and said, the High Priest of Wakanda has nullified our marriage. And she's like, aren't you the High Priest? And he's like, don't worry about that, and leaves. So like, I'm pretty sure he didn't lose Storm. He divorced her. So again, you know, it's, I guess, a matter of perspective. But the fact remains that while the Avengers are here, they're suddenly met by the arrival of Doctor Doom as the Sorcerer Supreme. Now, that was a thing that came out of the very ending of Blood Hunt. It was Doctor Doom who had attained the power of Doctor Strange, which had actually been given to Doctor Doom willingly, for Doom to basically cast a kind of magical spell that could effectively end the threat of like the vampires and basically the night sky lasting forever and so on and so forth. But what Doctor Doom did is he told Stephen Strange, I will give you your power back once I've saved the world. And when the immediate threat was dealt with, Doctor Doom was like, oh yeah, I mean, I'll give it back to you when I save the world. And I've only just begun, my friend, because what he does here is when he shows up to the Avengers and he basically calls them to his location, he's like, I have summoned you here to justify yourselves. Now, what follows is actually one of the greatest Doctor Doom speeches ever in Marvel Comics. And I think it's gonna go down in history as like one of the greatest speeches that he's ever had. Because he says, in my new position as Sorcerer Supreme, I have been meditating on the nature of power. As the Avengers, you represent one of the greatest concentrations of power in this world. So, why have you let the world you have sworn to protect come to this state? The world is riven by war, harrowed by hate, fractured, broken, warring flags, lesser men wielding power over their betters. Injustice is the common currency of the nations of this world. What should be your world? Why have you, the most powerful, allowed this to happen? And initially, Sam Wilson actually deflects because he doesn't have any kind of a good answer. He's like, oh, that's just rich talk coming from Dr. Doom. He's like, maybe, but it doesn't mean that I'm wrong. And he says, I've summoned you here to the graveyard of empires for the answer to one question. Why have you not taken this world in hand and set things to right? And so it creates this really amazing philosophical argument because he says, what army could stand against you? What weapons could the nations of Earth bring to bear against your power, your cunning, and your skill? Each of you is more than a match for any nation. 7 of you together more than a match for the world. What stays your hand, Avengers? Is it a lack of character, the cloak of cowardice that you call morality, or is it a fatal lack of imagination, unable to conceive of a better world? Perhaps the latter. Perhaps I should show you what could be. And so what he does is he literally gives them a glimpse and kind of alters reality almost immediately. And he shows Sam Wilson and he says, a captain, not of a decrepit union, a dying imperial power, but of a unified world. And another captain, now truly a marvel, representing a world brought together, ready to take its place on the galactic stage among equals. A flawed genius, finally free of weapons, consigning both his and the world's addiction to war to the scrap heap of history. A goddess, finally doing for her people what all the Avengers and X-Men could not do, securing the future of mutants, the greatest of all artificial life forms, freed from the imposition of human morality, free to burn the scourge of his ancestry from the face of the world, no matter the cost. And the hero to the hopeless, finally living up to her name, finally exercising the power she keeps so in check without fear for damaging the false structures of the world. A good world, a right world, an Avengers world. And he says, consider, this is not what could be, this is what should have been. This is what true ethics would demand of those with true power. Now, this is a really fascinating argument to make here, because while it is true that superheroes do exist to show humanity a better way and to guide humanity into a better future, what happens when humanity refuses to see a better way? When humanity refuses to be guided into a better future? At that point, you just drag them kicking and screaming, because the alternative is that humanity would ultimately destroy themselves and the world around them. And so if for no other reason than self-preservation, that the superhero mindset could arguably be, we will make you better if you don't want to be better. And that's what Dr. Doom is talking about, right? Of what use are all your actions as superheroes if you've done nothing to make the world better? You're literally a dog chasing cars. You're a gerbil on a hamster wheel. You're going nowhere in life. And so it's really fascinating because Storm responds and it's like, you ask a question in such a way that the only answer possible is the one that you wish, but the answers we have are not the ones that you like. And they all kind of chime in with their own individual stories, right? Like Iron Man's like, I used to design weapons. The weapons that I've made over the years have killed tens of thousands, right? Hundreds of thousands of people. And that's just in the opening moves. A better world cannot be created that way. And so Storm, interestingly enough, initially concedes and she says, you may be correct. We have the power to take the world, but not the right to do so. We are not the ultimate authority, Doom. We cannot be. That is what you of all people could never understand. We protect the world, Doom, protect it from the things that would end it. And Vision says, but we cannot fix it unilaterally. It is not a machine. We are protectors, not tyrants. We cannot impose our will on billions simply because we are strong, because we are powerful, not without betraying what the Avengers are. And so it's a really fascinating argument here because it's like, okay, yes, you're protecting humanity as they walk off a cliff. So why not just stop them from walking off a cliff? It creates these really, really interesting moral arguments. And it kind of asks the question, if they have the ability to, right? And it kind of presents this scenario. With great power must also come great responsibility. And while we normally use that argument in confinement to like, if you have the ability to help someone, you should help them, right? So like help that old lady being mugged on the street. You could argue that out to a larger scale. If you have the power to keep humanity from destroying itself, don't you have the responsibility to do that? And should you try to execute that responsibility by any means necessary? Now, I'm not advocating for fascism here, guys. I'm not saying like, take over the world, Avengers, right, and conquer it all. But I am saying, if the Avengers exist to protect the world from threats, and humanity has become a threat to the world, then it's their job to protect humanity from itself. And so Dr. Doom is just kind of like, okay, like I see I was incorrect, right? I was incorrect because it wasn't a lack of imagination that has held you back. It was cowardice. You, all of you with such power, yet so afraid of that power that you've let your fear master you when you should have mastered this world. You let your fear make you small, but Doom has never been and never will be small. And there is nothing that can master Doom, and he leaves. And what this does is this sets the stage for that like whole thing that Marvel's doing, right? One world under Doom, where Dr. Doom seizes control of the world. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.